All right, good morning again. Good to see you all. This being on Friday, the room gets a little bit fuller. And that's terrific, because this is going to be one heck of a panel. I'm very excited about it, not the least of which because of who's on it and some of the work that I know that I had a hand in it is being presented. So I won't spend much time introducing this panel. These are challenges behind affordable housing development. And as I mentioned in the opening to the conference, this is one of the most vexing issues for any notion of an equitable city, for any city. And so we wanted to focus on a diverse array of professionals whose work really exemplifies both innovation and approaches to the unique challenges in Newark and beyond. So I'm not going to spend much time introducing folks. We really do have wonderful bios that are accessible through the QR code. And so I will merely introduce each speaker before they speak. They'll speak like the last panel for about 10 to 12 minutes in their prepared remarks. One of the speakers is being beamed in from California, Elon Simon. She'll go third. And then we'll have discussion afterwards, directed first by me and then by you all in question and answer. So we begin with Marcus Randolph, our own Marcus Randolph, who is the president and CEO of Invest Newark, running the land bank for the city, with an illustrious history that I really wanted to describe in greater detail, but given time, I'll leave you all to look at in the brochure. Thank you so much for being here, Marcus.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We're going to try to get through this, but it really is an honor to be on this panel with esteemed housing scholars and practitioners. I think everybody starts their conversation, this panel sort of shaking out the nerves, maybe some self-deprecating humor, but honestly, I was sort of like, why am I on this panel? And when we had our pre-call, I definitely was like, there was somebody who couldn't make it, so they called me. But nonetheless, here we are. So I do want to talk about the North Land Bank. I think many people in this room know about the North Land Bank, know about land banking in general. But I want to try to talk about it in the context of innovation and the challenges that sometimes innovation, particularly in the housing movement, brings about. So, and also before I forget, I do have with me today a head of real estate and overseas land banking. Brent Good is here. Brent, put your hands up, hand up. So, any questions afterwards, you can speak to him or. So, first, what is a land bank? I'll touch on this very generally. Go to the next. So what is a land bank? A land bank is a public entity that specializes in the conversion of vacant, abandoned, and tax delinquent properties into productive use. Here are some, throughout this, you'll see some images of houses that we've done. I do want to make a distinction because it comes up a lot. Sometimes people use land bank and land trust interchangeably. They're not exactly the same thing. And land trust acquires land, and some of them do retain ownership of that land to ensure housing affordability for future generations. Some land trusts just hold it for public use, gardens, et cetera, et cetera. There is a distinction, but there is a way in the land bank to make sure that housing affordability does last throughout generations, and that's just the restriction. So land banking is not new in the United States. You'll see on this list here, we call first generation land banking. It's back in St. Louis, 1971, so we kicked it off. Second and third generations, that's slight change throughout the years. Right now, there's 170 or more land banks in the United States. Not in every state, but 170 or more in the United States, with New Jersey authorizing land banking in 2019, with our mayor, Rutgers, leading the charge on that, getting elected officials, particularly the governor, to sign off on this concept. And here's a little chart about in 2019, so about 5 years ago, the land bank law was passed. In April of 2020, council designated Invest North to be the land bank entity for the city. And I'll just pause here as well, just to sort of explain that, right? So Invest North is the land bank entity. It is the North Land Bank. We manage it for the city. Other places have separate land banks. And of course, all this is happening during COVID. So, shout out to my predecessor and predecessors who were at Invest North who got this through, even at the height of COVID, right? The North Land Bank officially launched this in March of 2021. So now to a little bit more substance. So sort of digging in further. So what is it that land banks address? Typically, this is what you have with a land bank. You've got large numbers of vacant, abandoned, and dilapidated properties, which if anybody's been in the real estate business, you know when you do a rehab project, so you open the walls, you immediately find out that their price is going to cost you more to rehab it than you originally thought. We've got fragmented inventories. In other words, it would be ideal to go to one particular neighborhood and say, we're going to get all 20 of these properties. Oftentimes it's one over here, it's two over there, or in our case, it's 10 in the south, or 15 in the west, one in the north. So they're all over the place. So you're trying to make an impact based on the fact that you've got these sort of pockets, which sort of leads to what we hope comes out of the land bank work is that people in the communities actually pick up on it as well and begin to make changes. Properties with little market value. Often explaining it like, the market has spoken. No one wants this, right? If they did, they would have A, retained it, or it would have been purchased by now. But I do want to make a distinction that the market value of the lack thereof isn't just because of the location. I want to be very clear about that. Sometimes it's due to the limited development potential. I'll touch on this just briefly in the next slide. But we have in other land banks, like in Albany and other places, we have a side lot program. In other words, these lots are so small, so irregularly shaped, you can't do anything with it. I mean, not really, right? So what do people do? They just ignore it, right? It gets chopped up over years, title gets all messed up, people just stop paying taxes on it. It becomes ownership of the city, but it's really not much you can do with that. So we try to address that as well. And then on restrictive property disposition requirement, I'll just touch on this briefly. It does depend on what municipality you're in, what state you're in, but there are limitations on future actions after a foreclosure. And, I won't go into a lot of detail on that. But again, innovation, right? So land banking itself is not new. Land banking in New Jersey is new. Land banking in New York is new. We are still the only land bank in the state of New Jersey. And so the thought came, by our mayor and others at the time to use the land banking model to boost home ownership and create new housing opportunities. So we often show this slide a lot, almost every presentation that we make, we include this slide because it really does encapsulate what it is that we're trying to do. Yes, we are seeking to boost home ownership. We are looking to create affordable housing within the land bank ordinance. We can also do market rate housing. But the other things that we're accomplishing, reducing blight, we are putting money back into the local community by being very focused on engaging in WBE developers who are based right here in New York and subcontractors as well. Hopefully, we are seeing those businesses grow by getting engaged via the land bank. We're also, as a city following, we're trying to improve the quality of life for North residents. So I'll just touch on a couple of these. I won't move all these, but the opportunities. So when we say equitable home ownership, we really are trying to figure out, and it's a bit of a conundrum, to be honest with you. How can we make sure that people who have been in work, who may be low income or very low income, can somehow benefit from the program and become homeowners. The Section 8 voucher program, voucher conversion program gets a lot of publicity. It is a unique way to get people who have had vouchers, who have actually paying for rent, to turn them into homeowners. It is still a process. It's still a form of subsidy. I would like to say that wrote this and figured it all out, but actually it's been something that can be done for many years. It's just that most municipalities have not actually tried to do it, and folks have not figured out how to do it, and have done so well. There's actually discussion on the state level about how to replicate that. So it's been very good. We've had what they say about the development process, like at first everybody's fighting, then the ribbon cutting, everybody comes out, it's cool by God, we all love each other. And so we've had some of those moments too, where we welcome in folks to the Section 8 conversion-led houses. We also do some move-in, what we call move-in ready. So basically, these are for people who don't have a voucher, and I may get a chance to talk about that a little bit later. Now to speak down to the sideline initiative, which I spoke about before. We do try to sell these to the adjacent owner. They're not very costly, but I think there are people who simply just cannot afford to spend $3,000 to get a small piece of land, which may ultimately improve, or should increase the value overall. So these are things that we're dealing with through the land bank initiative. And again, here's some pictures. This was a project that was done. We actually engaged Equitable to do this project on Peshon a couple of years ago. Here's an example of you sort of see it in this upper left. That's the size of the lot, right? So it's a buildable lot, obviously. We sold this one to a local developer who put up this house, and I think one across the street, I think, but I think I've seen this model by him more than once. So this sort of makes me think about my so again, there's lots again. It's not that it's not about the location. There are other developers who are building similar houses in New York. Some of them are multi-family. And I do look at some social media about New York, and some of the negative comments are really a bit disheartening because people are very critical about the area. But I can tell you, these houses are selling. They're absolutely selling. So now, I lost track of my time here, but so let me get to some of the challenges that come along with innovation. So ultimately for us, right? So the land bank could decide, because others do this, that sell, just sell the vacant land. Most land banks do that. We're a little bit different than that. When you do sell something, we also act as a developer. So in other words, invest in the work, Greg's team, we are engaging contractors. We're going through the whole process to get some of these houses up. We also have a mandate to provide affordable housing, and this is where the challenge comes. We want to make sure that we're able to provide home ownership opportunities for at prices that most people in New York can afford. That is very challenging. It's just a math. And as people say, the math don't math all the time. We need to figure out subsidies. Now, my experience in housing is many localities have robust subsidy programs, but that's rental housing. When you talk about home ownership, there's sort of a, whoa, wait a minute. That becomes very challenging. The Section 8 voucher is a form of a subsidy. It still ends up in many cases that we're selling a house for less than what it costs to build. If you don't have that voucher, then we're trying to figure out how do we close the gap. So certainly keeping low acquisition costs. At the moment, all 169 properties we've got have come from the city, but we have the ability to acquire other properties. You got to keep those costs low. Construction costs, though, are outside of our control. Sheet rock costs what it costs. Timber costs what it costs. We have had, I won't name it, I didn't ask permission, but we have had one supplier that actually has given us discounts on materials on finding out what the land bank is seeking to do. And that's been great, but we need to scale that up. That would be awesome, right? But that is just totally outside of our control, cost of materials to build. We try to self-subsidize. In other words, when we do sell a vacant piece of property, that money just has to go back into offsetting the cost to build the other houses or rehabs that we can't obviously sell at the cost that it takes to put those up. For the buyers, of course, there are down payment assistance programs. The city has one, the state has one. I think there's 20,000 from the state. But the reality is some of these people, that's on the back end, right? They sort of figured out how to get a house, right? There's still some other issues that present themselves up front that they can't even get to the funding or going down that path. So where I sort of want to leave my part of this is the philanthropic support. So we've had some. We have had some. But what I keep saying is in order for us to scale up, to keep prices at a level where people can afford them, we do need that shot of philanthropic support. And if you have followed any of the announcements that have come out, even like just the last year or two, you know, some of these awards or funding that nonprofits get, when you say $2 million a year, 10 million over 5 years, comparatively speaking to some other, that's not a lot of money. It really isn't. If we had $2 million every year for say the next 5 years, I'm very confident I could take $100,000 and put that into 20 houses, and that would make the difference for people who make $60,000 to be able to afford a house versus the person who's struggling to figure out how to do it. Because what we have to remember is home ownership is costly. You can get in the house, but then you have to also maintain the house, right? So we gotta keep this conversation going. I think it's very critical. I could talk for the rest of the day about the benefits of home ownership. I think we'll get to some of that, but I'll pause right there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Our next presenter is, I think I mentioned in the opening that we have a new scholar who will be beamed in from California, and we have a renowned scholar. And so the next speaker is that renowned scholar, urbanist, and deep thinker, writer, and housing expert, Alan Malik. Alan is the author of so many important works that have challenged many of the assumptions that so many of us who work in this space have had to wrestle with over the years. He's a senior fellow with the Center for Community Progress in Washington, D.C., and the author of The Divided City, Poverty and Prosperity in Urban America. The rest of his bio is available to you through the site. Alan Malik.
I was about to start clapping for me. No idea. But okay, I'm going to talk kind of sort of generally and then sort of try to zoom in a little bit on specific ideas. And I was a little, one of the first comment, the way this was titled, innovation, you know, was a bit of a problem for me. Because one of the things I've learned, and I've been working in different aspects of the housing space for a long time. And I know that ever since I became involved, which was back in the late 60s, early 70s, people have tried all kinds of innovations to figure out how to break through the difficulties of creating affordable housing, especially equitable affordable housing. And there have been a lot of major steps. But there are no magic bullets. And one thing, first thing, we've created, and this is a large systemic problem in our economy, what I think of as a systemic gap between what it costs to provide the least expensive but decent, safe, and healthy housing, and what people who are either poor or near poor, or the single mom working with Walmart and so forth, can realistically afford. So we have created a system. So the housing affordability problem, the fact that millions of people in this country are paying 40, 50, 60% of their income for shelter, is not, it's not a fluke that we can fix these. It's systemic to the way the American economy is organized and the way the American housing is structured. So we have, and the cost to deliver new housing is skyrocketing. The cost of materials, the cost of development, and this is a relatively recent phenomenon. I mean, Newark, I don't know exactly what the typical construction costs in Newark are exactly, but I'm guessing you're probably talking $250 to $300 per square foot just for hard costs.
You give a little bit less, but you really be earnest, please.
So when you look at that, and then you add on all the soft costs, hopefully affordable land through the land bank, but that's, again, that's limited. You can't, it's not an unlimited resource. We're not going to produce our way to an equitable, affordable housing solution for the city. Everything we can produce will help, but it's not going to be enough. And that's true whether we talk about tiny homes, using containers, all those things help move things forward a little bit, but not enough. So the basic principle is that the great majority of Newark residents, especially lower income Newark residents, are going to continue to be living in the existing housing stock, which already exists in this city. So I think, and this is like the central theme, is we really have to figure out, at the same time as producing what can be produced, how can we make the existing housing stock of the city work best for the people who live in this city. And a big part of that, which ties, it's not just about the housing as individual 3-family triple-decker houses. It's about the neighborhood environment. And so what I would suggest, and this by way of comment, home ownership, and first I agree with Marcus, home ownership is really important. But I think Newark gives itself a bad rap about the home ownership issue. And I've seen so many people saying, and articles, op-eds and what have you, we only have a 25% home ownership rate. This is horrible. We've got to do something about it. Well, wait a minute. So much of Newark's housing is multifamily housing. So much of Newark's housing is 3-family housing. You walk down the streets of Newark, you're not seeing many single-family houses. Right. You're seeing 3-family houses. And when you figure, if you had a city that was entirely made up of 3-family houses, unless you want to start creating 3-unit condos, which is one of the stupidest ideas you can imagine. Basically, you have a maximum theoretically possible homeownership rate of 33%. And Newark also has a lot of large rental apartment buildings complexes. Yeah. So I figure if you do what you might call a housing type adjusted homeownership rate, when you calculate what the theoretical homeownership rate is in 2-family and 3-family and so forth, Newark's homeownership rate is actually about 60%, which is, it's not wonderful, but it's not bad. Given the demographics of the city, so I don't think Newark should keep punishing itself for a low home ownership rate. Newark should accept, and the thing is, in many respects, a three-family house, an owner-occupied three-family house, is a very good sort of arbiter, you might say, for equitable housing. Because what you're talking about, you've got a homeowner with all of those benefits, and you have two rental units. And you can use those rental units, you can use Section 8 vouchers in those rental units, and what's even more important is even if the house costs $400,000 or $500,000, which is a lot of money, and I can remember it wasn't all that long ago you could buy a fairly decent triple decker in Newark for $150,000 to $200,000. Now but when you do the math, that's from the standpoint of affordable home ownership, because you're offsetting the cost of housing with the rental income from those two units, you can actually make home ownership of a three-family house a lot more affordable than a single-family house. Now, obviously, not every would-be home buyer wants to be a landlord, or realistically should be a landlord. It's work, it requires a certain temperament. But that said, I think in many respects, I think one of the things Newark should think about is not only increasing owner occupancy of triple deckers, 2 and 3 family houses, but also working. One thing is to make sure that mortgages that take into account the rental income are available for those buyers, provide a support system for essentially, what you're talking about is whenever somebody buys a 3-family house, you're talking about you've just created a mom and pop landlord. And one thing cities should, good, responsible mom and pop landlords, especially the ones who live in the same buildings with the tenants, are an asset for the city. And one thing I'd suggest, think about creating either through the city directly, maybe through Invest Newark, maybe through CDCs and nonprofits, a support system for mom and pop landlords. Because again, maintaining a decent private sector housing stock that's relatively affordable, or at least as affordable as it can be under realistic circumstances, is a huge part of the city's affordable housing strategy. I mean, now ideally, what we need in this country, more from a housing standpoint, more than any other single strategy, is an entitlement voucher program that anybody in need should be able to. I mean, if you need or can't afford food and meet the criteria, you can get SNAP benefits. I'm not saying the criteria are the best ones or the program is the best, but if you meet the criteria, you get the benefit. Same is true of Medicaid. If you meet the criteria, you get the benefit. There are lots of problems with those programs, but the basic principle is important. But if you need housing and you can't afford housing, it's like buying a lottery. Maybe you'll get lucky. So now that's not something Newark can solve, but I would certainly argue that anybody who is involved in advocacy at a state or especially at the national level should be pushing that. It's far more important than increasing the allocation of low-income tax credits, even though that's a good idea. It's far more important than any other single housing strategy being proposed by anybody today at the national level, my opinion. But in the meantime, though, ensuring that the private rental stock in this city is safe and healthy, and that landlords have the support they need to become good landlords is a tremendously important. I would put that as one of the critical strategies. And along those lines, is maybe think about a program. Is there a way of providing incentives to a lot of the triple deckers are owned by investors, but typically they don't hold them all that long. How about a program to provide incentives to investors to sell to a homeowner rather than to another investor or speculator? Again, it's clearly, I mean, I don't have to belabor this because, Marcus, this clearly underlies everything Marcus has said. Publicly owned land, and I saw this publication as well. Publicly owned land has become, in this city today, is an asset, is a community, a fundamental community asset. And I would argue that in addition to all the good principles for using publicly owned land in this book, I'd add another principle, which is that when a possible use for a piece of land comes up, always ask the question, how will this make the neighborhood it's in stronger? Sometimes you can have a reasonable use, but if you put that screen on it and say, well, it doesn't really, but if we did this, we could really strengthen the fabric of this neighborhood. So I'd add that as an additional criteria, because ultimately it's not just about housing. It's about having stronger, healthier neighborhoods that have a stronger social fabric as well as a physical fabric. And I think that's my main point. Not that you should stop doing anything you're doing, not to discourage, to the extent that new housing can be produced and the capital subsidies can be scrounged to make it possible by all means. But at the same time, I think there has to be a major focus on the existing private stock and on the existing neighborhoods, because ultimately in the end, that's what's going to matter to the vast majority of the people who live in this city and who don't have the money to move to Livingston or someplace, but who are the real fabric of the city of Newark. Thank you.
Thank you. So Alan raised several points that work as a segue to our next speaker, the newer scholar on the panel, CLiME. And Alan mentioned that we might want to give ourselves a bit of a break on the home ownership rate. I know that there are people who work in the city of Newark, particularly in EHD, that would say that we're really doing exactly that with some of the new initiatives. And I just want to acknowledge that the notion of building home ownership while also creating affordable rental is something that the Baraka administration has been doing through several programs, which you'll probably hear a little bit more about it on this panel than in the panel after lunch. The other issue is something he began with, and that is that we are very unlikely to meet the demand for affordable housing in this city. That we're not going to meet it through the production of new affordable housing, and we may not meet it even through a greater emphasis on the nuances on existing housing. And that goes back to a report that we did years ago on the affordability gap, showing that at least at that time, and that was 2-3 years ago, the number of units needed to meet the need for affordable housing in the city of Newark was something like, it was over 16,000 units. We're just not on pace through any imaginable combination of means to reach anything close to that number. But it was actually that number and that gap that motivated some of the work that you're about to hear. about. Alana Simon was a senior research fellow at CLiME last year. She's a graduate of the Glasgow School, where she got a master's in both informatics as well as in urban planning. She's an urban planner, and she's currently pursuing her PhD at USC. You can read more about the specifics of her bio. She and I co-authored this report, but she is the primary author. It's important to recognize that. You all have it. We don't print a lot of our reports, but we printed this one because we're that proud of the many different things that she's capable of producing in this report, which not only looked at what she did originally in the partnership, which was to work in property management, to be embedded in City Hall and property management and help reorganize their data platform to scrub it clean so that it was just more efficient, more user-friendly, more efficacious, but also to look at the city's inventory of properties it owned that had not gone to the land bank, right? So there's city-owned property that goes to the land bank, and there's city-owned property that the city retains. This report reflects the latter. The properties that the city has retained residential, zoned residential, commercial, and then that sort of netherworld of unbuildable lots. And so really what she did, and you're about to hear, is to simulate not only the existence of these lots, but what could be done with these lots. And especially when it comes to trying to innovate around affordable housing, given that enormous gap that we're all trying to overcome, how can the city imagine more productive use of its own properties in order to help meet that gap in a variety of creative ways? So without more, Alana Simon.
Hi. Okay, great. Good morning. So thank you, David, for the introduction. I think with that, I will jump right in. So today, I think I'm just going to start by framing how this report about the strategic use of city-owned property can help us think about affordable housing challenges and innovation. So one of the most apparent challenges that we've already discussed today for affordable housing development is, of course, the cost of land. Development is facing escalating costs, requires a stack of multiple subsidies. So the acquisition of city-owned property at a nominal fee is a critical resource for development. But affordable housing challenges are not limited to brick and mortar development, but the opportunity to utilize city-owned land is also linked to questions of preservation. Once we've poured public resources into affordable housing development, how should the public asset be stewarded and preserved over time? So some of the city's current policies for deed restricted affordable housing are an example of this. Then we also need to talk about some limits. There's a finite amount of land, and we don't get to choose where it's located. So how does available property align with need, both existing and future? And are there ways that we can think creatively about clustering housing and other uses to support health and well-being? And finally, there's the question of governance. What entities should be charged with making decisions about how to align redevelopment with a host of pressing needs? And what role do Newark residents play in these redevelopment decisions that impact their neighborhoods? For this report, we developed a simulation. And the spirit of a simulation is not to present a plan with all of the answers, but to create a tool to help us ask questions about the possibilities as well as limitations with public assets. So as David mentioned, this project originally stemmed from a collaboration with the city. So several of our data sources to develop the simulation were those city property inventory records, which we combined with zoning data and tax parcel data. What the simulation does is estimate the maximum by right development as per the proposed 2023 zoning ordinance, which reflects the city's intention to increase density in several major corridors. We filter the qualified parcels based on parcel size, but not other features of the building and land due to data limitations. So the simulation is not a reflection of individual parcel development feasibility. And an important note to flag for all of our findings is that our data reflects the inventory as a snapshot in a moment of time as of June 2023. And so property has been conveyed since then. So these numbers don't reflect the current inventory. So here's where we started. This map is a portrait of the city's inventory as of June 2023. So our universe for the simulation is available city-owned property in standard zoning districts. So we're actually excluding about 300 parcels that are in redevelopment areas. And the green dots on this map show this broader category of city-owned property that does not have a municipal use. On this map, we've also shown some of the land bank properties in red and pink. Again, that data is current as of last June. And you can see sort of the spatial distribution of city-owned land is concentrated in the South Central and West wards. So for housing simulation, we found that it would be possible to develop about 2,500 housing units across 319 structures. And these structures reflect where the parcel falls within a residential zoning district in its maximum intensive use. So this includes a range of, single family with ADU, 3 and 4 family, and multifamily. The largest concentration of simulated units are in that 3 and 4 family, in that 3 and 4 family category. About half of all simulated sites are in the South Ward, another 30% in the West Ward, and about a fifth in the Central Ward. And then to put this into perspective, to what extent does simulated housing align with existing need? So for example, these approximately 2,500 units would represent about 38% of the city's goal to produce 6,600 affordable units by 2026. Another way to put this into perspective is by measuring this against CLiME's affordable rental needs report from 2021. And these 2,500 units would be about 15% of the 16,000 units in need. We're not suggesting that all simulated units ought to be rentals, but again, this is just to put this figure in the context of other policy goals about housing need. And so while simulated housing represents a meaningful portion of existing need, we really should think of this as one of multiple affordable housing strategies, as it doesn't fill the full gap. And also we should be thinking about how these uses might not only meet current needs, but needs into the future, given that housing takes a long time to build and it sticks around for a long time. We also found in developing our simulation that there were many parcels where it would not be possible to build housing because they fall into a commercial industrial zone, or the lot is too small, or perhaps irregularly sized. So we ran additional simulations focusing on economic uses and industrial areas, as well as mixed use buildings and commercial areas, and a green space simulation looking how green infrastructure such as small parks, even perhaps green roofs and pervious sidewalks would be able to mitigate exposure to environmental hazards such as heat islands and flooding. So the map on the right is showing in green the green infrastructure simulated sites on these small and irregularly developed lots. We also wanted to imagine what would it look like to put green roofs on our simulated housing sites, as well as existing municipal buildings. And so here's an example of thinking about how can we overlay housing and other uses related to public benefits. So the map on the left is showing some of these mixed use sites. We simulated 40 mixed use sites where upper floors would be residential and the first floor would be used for a subsidized commercial space. And we propose that the subsidized space should be for uses that support the social determinants of health, such as grocery stores, community clinics, daycares, restaurants. And we found that 90% of the simulated housing units are within a half-mile radius of these sites. So there's a real opportunity to think about aligning housing with other uses that support community needs. And the map on the left is showing an additional overlay of areas that the USDA has identified as low food access. So it's critical that there are several of these mixed use simulated sites that align with those areas or are very close to them. The map on the left, or sorry, on the right is showing sort of a close-up image of the West Ward, where 35 green infrastructure sites, which we propose might look like a small park, are within a quarter-mile radius of 87 simulated affordable housing sites. So again, using the simulation to illustrate the potential to overlay housing with uses that support other needs. And I'll conclude by highlighting some questions that I think that the simulation is posing, because again, the simulation is a tool for thinking about possibilities. For these simulated 2,500 sites, what form of tenure might the housing be? Rental, owner-owned, home ownership, or cooperatively owned? What should be the terms of affordability to ensure that the asset is preserved for public uses in the future? What entities should be charged with making redevelopment decisions to address a host of pressing needs? And then there's the question of implementation. What entities should be the brick and mortar work of redevelopment? And what entity should own the land and serve as a steward? So I'll conclude and leave us with these questions, and I look forward to discussing the report and hearing your reactions and comments. Thank you.
I just have to say, thank you, Alana. It is really, haven't had the opportunity because a lot has been going on in California all these months, and we released the report. Just how grateful I have been to work with her. Just what tremendous work you just heard about. In part because you could tell it reflects so many of the thoughts that have been expressed during the comments in this and the previous panel. Trying to comprehend that in research. Even that starts from a quantitative base, but eventually moves forward into placemaking and people's actual lived experiences in their community. So thank you again, Alana. Last but certainly not least is Adina Brano, who is a developer extraordinaire. It's almost to miss so much of what she contributes as a developer, as a business person. She really represents the best of the entrepreneurial spirit in thinking about community change, and thinking about ownership, and thinking about the way that even capitalism, that's taken a few hits so far in this conference, can be wielded much more effectively and compassionately to achieve some of the same goals of an equitable city that we've all talked about. So I do want to, you can again read her bio. I'm making sure that she has her technical support set up. But I do want to just, from the bottom of my heart and my stomach, recommend her restaurants to you, because she's going to talk about housing today. But And that food is good, and if you're a vegan, you're not left out, you know, you just go in the vegan door. Yeah, all right.
Thanks, everybody. So great to be here today with everyone. Let's get right into it. If anybody answer what is the best soul food restaurant in the state of New Jersey, I gotta look for you. What is it? Cornbread. Cornbread, there you go. Urban vegan, I said soul food. Well, but there you go. You got black eyed peas in it. It has black eyed peas. The book I'm giving away today, I have 3 more copies. I am gonna give those away as well. You want one? It's The Color of Law. You had to earn this. It's The Color of Law, and I'm going to make sure the 3 copies get. So I'm gonna start by, obviously, if you're not at the table, you are on the menu. I want to talk about innovations today, but I want to talk about how we can envision innovation backwards. I think the reason why I wanted to start this, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, because a lot of what's happening in Newark is happening and we're spectators. And we need to be at the table. And we're going to talk a lot about equity, inequality here today. I just, I have this here, and I take it to quite a few presentations that I do around affordable housing. And it's look at the little guy. Everyone is given the same resources. He doesn't have a clear view of that baseball game. He clearly wants to see the game. He doesn't have the height. That is no fault of his own. Should he be left out that game, not watch the game? No. What if we find a little stool for little guy and give him the resource that he needs to enjoy that game? And I use the baseball game really as a metaphor. But let's think about the baseball game broadly as to what we see as inequality that's happening around the country today. A lot of where we are today as a people, as a community, is no fault of our own. It's not. It's not. And we talked a little bit about this when we was getting ready for this. It's systematic, and we're operating in arenas that the race started maybe 50 years ago, and we're now just getting into the race. It's gonna be hard to catch up. And we need to stop telling the people, catch up, it's your fault. It's not. That Black Girl Magic, we need to stop singing that. It's hard as hell. So I think if we're going to talk about innovation in affordable housing, we have to talk about equality and inclusion, right? 1 in every 600 developers that do affordable housing in this country is a developer of color. Not 1 in 6, 1 in every 600. 1 in every 1,200 is a woman of color that's doing affordable housing. Thank you to everyone in here. I'm going to embarrass some folks, Evan Wise, for allowing me the honor of last year, 2023, being the first African American woman in the state of New Jersey to be awarded the 9% tax credit. People in this room that play a really big part into that. And Evan's gonna just go underneath the ground right now because he's so shy. 71% of renters live in affordable housing are minorities. 71%. 75% of renters live in affordable housing households are women and single mothers. So let's go back to my top statistic. 600 out of one person is developing. 599 is developing for 71%. Do we see the disparity? Every one woman of color is developing for 75%. Let's just sit with that for a moment, right? So, policy deficiency. I think one of the things that I talk about all the time, my therapist tell me I should read other books besides Color of Law, Color of Money. She's like, read novels or something. Is that you get stuck in these policies and you see the same policies, and whoever gets this book, and if you haven't read A Color of Law, the same things that we're talking about in the 60s, haven't moved, haven't changed, right? They just haven't. And the median income for a Newark renter is $29,758, right? The average rent for a one bedroom in Newark is $1,507 a month. Okay? Average rent for a one bedroom affordable housing unit. Now, this is what we, HUD, HMFA deem as affordable, is $1,100. And I went by the updated guidelines. Not 2024, right? This is 2023. Okay. So a Newark renter should only be paying $871 a month based on their income per month to keep them out of poverty, right? So we know this, the policymakers know this, but when we go to submit our application, why aren't we pushing people? Why am I doing my performer based on the average median income of Essex County? Yes. Essex County has Short Hills, yes. Milburn, yes. Roseland, Montclair, Livingston, yes. Maplewood, right? Why? We know what we're gonna have to ask, and I know this for a fact. We don't have lazy people. We have working poor. We have individuals in Newark that have to work 2 full-time jobs. Yes. Yes. If they want to have decent housing. Yes. And that just shouldn't be. We're just too smart, and I just feel like we've come so long that these things and these should not just be statistics anymore. So I want to tell you a little story about, and I changed the name, and this just happened. This really killed me. I think I walk around almost half the time depressed, but people just don't know it. I want you to meet someone, we call her Nicole. So she's a school teacher in Newark, teaches at one of the charter schools. She's a single mother of 3. She put in an application to one of my buildings, and she got turned down. So she showed up at the restaurant and she wanted to talk to me. So she couldn't get me. So she reached out to the councilwoman and the councilwoman got in touch with me. She said, you know, one of my constituents needs to meet with you. Met with her, and I dived in a little bit. Why did we turn Nicole down? Nicole was going for a 3-bedroom apartment. Her income is $63,000 a year. We deem her not eligible for that apartment. because the income she should have been making is $58,000 a year with 3 kids, right? And the rent that she was going for, that 3-bedroom in that particular unit, was $1,650 a month. And the reason why I was like really heartbroken and I couldn't really do anything for her was I couldn't. I could not. The federal guidelines mandated that we could not. So what are the options for Nicole? Is to go on the open market and get a 3-bedroom for roughly $2,600 to $3,000 a month, where she would spend over 40% of her income just on rent. So do we want to know who are the victims of such a policy? Not so much Nicole, yes, Nicole too, because she's going to likely tell her manager or supervisor the next time she want to get a raise, don't give me a raise. I've had some of my employees say to me, I don't want a raise because then I lose my apartment. Or I lose my Section 8 or my subsidy for my kids. But what happened is her children now get to grow up in a household where they don't have the adequate means to really be active citizens and be active in the sense that the extracurricular activities that they need to participate in to make their minds as sharp as a bee, they won't have the chance to do that because their mother will not be able to afford that. If she do that, we essentially have told her she's gonna be property. Yeah. Here are the people that I'm oftentimes saying no to when it comes to affordable housing. Our school teachers, who you just met, our first year, second year, third year firefighters, the clerks that work in your permitting department, in your city hall, first year accounting, nurses aide, and police. Those are the people that we're saying we want to keep in our communities, but we have nowhere to house them. In my experience, the things that is keeping innovation out of affordable housing is, if you've always done what you've always done, you will always be where you have always been. The legacy developers in the state of New Jersey, there are, I think it was an act of God. And when I say act of God, really, there are God people walking amongst us every day. And our job is to find those people that have those same hearts and ask to, let's go break, I won't say glass ceiling, let's go break glass concrete. Affordable housing system that has not changed since the 70s. And I'll tell you a story. So I have a project, a small project in Maplewood. I just built a small affordable unit. And the first time I went to the planning board, I was getting this sense that something is going wrong. And I told my team, let's shut it down, let's come back. We was gonna go ask for approval to build affordable housing. We said, no, if we come here, this is Monday Night Football. And we would not get through. We came back, we changed the project around, but sometimes you just have to be really creative and find a way, the system that we have, to make it work. And sometimes it's being tenacious, not taking no, and really hold the people that are in place. And powerful systems don't yield. They don't yield. Power do not yield. They have to be broken. We came back. We didn't say we're getting affordable housing. We built it. I took the private route. We built the houses, found a non-for-profit. Now that it's already built, they gave me the lots were zoned for only single families. And I always say to people, you do your research. Single family is probably the most racist instrument designed by our government to keep people out of certain communities. And if I knew going to that planning board, I was gonna go ask for affordable housing, I was gonna get a no, because I needed them to change because I had the lot size, but it was just zoned for single family only. So we went, we got the approval for 2 families. And even after we didn't say anything, when the not-for-profit came to purchase them, that's when they knew, who would live here again? And I said, oh my God, my instinct was so right. Because now the property is built, the not-for-profit have all of the qualifications to buy the property and eventually rent them out to affordable renters. So, 1 minute. If you look at the system in terms of, we all talk about what we want, we know what we need, we know what we want. It's very hard. What we don't understand is that, especially in communities and communities of color, we have got to take community systems and really re-examine them and ask the questions, are the systems in place now working for our current conditions? And if the answer is no, then we have got to do the hard work to change those systems so the systems can work for us. So I do want to highlight a bit of a solution here. So we just closed on our project that we just did on Springfield, South 11th Street. And why is this project different? This project is a first generation Black female developer. 90% of the professionals that work on this project were women. Every problem that we have talked about here, this building is somehow going to solve. Every time you talk about access to Wi-Fi, in this building when we build it, every apartment is gonna come not Wi-Fi ready. Your internet is gonna be paid for the next 15 years. Our partners, our non-for-profit partners, we're gonna have a tutor in the building between the hours of 3:30 and 6:30 to work with the kids. Every child in that building is gonna have access to a laptop. Access to computer lab and social service, and we're gonna run a program that gets renters to home ownership. And I do want to close by this. Women belong in all places, decisions are being made. If we're going to change affordable housing, let's start with the people that live in affordable housing. Thank you, guys.
So we have servers who will be serving us lunch, which means that a lot of different pieces put together for the luncheon, and we don't want to leak too far into it. That means that the Q&A will have to be 1 question long. And I do not dare to be that questioner. So who from the audience will give us that one burning question?
Maybe you get a book if you ask the question.
Oh, that's right. There's a book up there. Maybe you get 2 books. It's that good. Anyone have a question for the panel? You all are that hungry? Here's the question. Yes.
So for the project
think you were talking about the south side view. How do the residents, start applying?
So thankfully, you get a vote. We just closed on our construction loan. We're getting in the ground, next week. And we're going to really be in partnership with the city of Newark, because the city of Newark, I want to say, and not just the city of Newark, but the community as a whole, has been really, really instrumental in this project. I want to have some public conversations, talking to people in the community about their project, getting people in there and understanding that this is not just an affordable housing project, but it's special in the sense that it's for us and it's also by us. So we're gonna work with the city and our community team to really make sure that everybody knows. It's just 40 units. I know we're gonna have about 600 applications, but it's fine. It just means that the work we have to do is just that much more important.